Hello and welcome to my podcast on the apocalypse. My name is Steve. In my previous podcast, I introduced the book The Apocalypse Letter by Letter, a literary analysis of the book of Revelation by Stephen Paul. To increase your understanding of the symbolized series of events in the forepart of chapter 12 of the Apocalypse, consider what St. Paul wrote on screen. Let not someone deceive you regarding anything, that if the apostasy has not come first, also the son of lawlessness is revealed, the son of annihilation, the one opposed and exalted over all called God or worship, so that him unto the sanctuary of the God does he seat, proclaiming himself that he is God. Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I told you these things? And you know the thing restraining at present until the revealing him in his own time. For the mystery of lawlessness is operating already, only there is the one restraining right now until he has gotten out of the middle. And at that time, the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will overcome with the breath of his mouth and annihilate with the manifestation of his presence. The mystery of lawlessness opposes the mystery of the God, Jesus Christ, and his church. In the aforegiven excerpt, St. Paul implies that the mystery of lawlessness would culminate in the man of lawlessness. St. John, too, implied the same in one of his own epistles. Children, it is the last hour, and exactly as you heard that Antichrist is coming, also at present many Antichrists have come. Thus do we know that it is the last hour. And the man of lawlessness then is the Antichrist who is coming, i.e., the Antichrist. Relevant, therefore, to chapter 12 is the order of events as indicated by Paul. The apostasy comes, the restrainer of the lawless one is removed, the man of lawlessness is revealed, and Christ annihilates the Antichrist. Note that Paul described the restrainer as both a man in verse 7 and a thing in verse 6, using a masculine nominalized participle and a neuter one respectively, and this agrees with a son virile and the thing born of her in chapter 12. Now the mystery of the God opposes the mystery of lawlessness, and therefore the restrainer of the lawless one is in the church. Like other New Testament writers, Paul often used the noun naos, sanctuary, as a symbol for the church. Hence the phrase enmisu, ekmisu, is not just a Greek idiom here, but connotes the very middle of the sanctuary, the throne and the dais around it, where the Father and the little lamb and the four living beings are. The work of restraining the mystery of lawlessness properly belongs to the vicar of Christ, as Jesus himself intimated. And even I say to you, even I say to you that you are Peter, Petros, the man, and upon this rock, Petra, the thing I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. Whereas men do not live long on this earth, and whereas the restrainer existed in Paul's day and will exist still when the lawless one is about to be revealed, it should have been obvious to all that to katexov signified a spiritual office that is devolved from generation to generation, an office of great authority instituted and sanctioned, sustained by Christ himself. The term okateknon indicated that only one man occupies the office at any particular time. The fact that only one man, because of his office, will be able to restrain the mystery of lawlessness, the machinations of Satan himself to produce the Antichrist, should have induced in every Roman Catholic mind the conclusion that the office is the papacy. So often the obstacle to the obvious is the ken of men themselves. I move on. In Apocalypse chapter 12, verse 4, John wrote that the dragon's tail, dragged by force the third of the stars of the heaven and cast out them unto the earth. It has already been explained that the stars cast out unto the earth were those members of the clergy too tepid and too timid to resist the false prophet, and so they apostatize. It is reasonable to assume that an equal or even greater percentage of the laity will also abandon Christ and the brethren. The phrase of the heavens signifies the church in general. However, the context in which a term appears should not be ignored. Observe that John did not use the definite article in the phrase a crown of 12 stars, but that he did use it in the phrase the third of the stars of the heaven, which in its form is the same as the third of the men. To wit, the phrase means that third of those stars, thus making a special reference to the stars in the woman's crown. Taking into account the identity of the woman and the meaning of her crown, the significance of the third of the stars becomes clear. Jesus will allow the crisis to reach the point that the third of the cardinals in the church will betray, but not one cardinal more, because the 2/3 of the cardinals are necessary for a majority vote in electing a pope. Bear in mind that before the virile son was brought forth, conflict was confined to the woman versus the dragon, and also that the dragon and his followers were still visible in the heaven, i.e., in the presence of the face to face with the woman. But after the virile son was brought forth, conflict was expanded to all the faithful versus the unfaithful, and the dragon and his followers were cast out, so that not a place was found of them still in the heaven. Chapter 12, verse 8. Therefore, the term stars in the phrase the third of the stars cannot represent all the clergy of the church. Rather, according to the context and the use of the definite article, it alludes to the woman and her crown exclusively. For the defection of the third of the stars was a consequence only of the conflict between the woman and the dragon, not of the war described in chapter 12, verses 7 through 9. Moreover, in the phrases of Michael and his angels and the dragon and his angels, chapter 12, verse 7, the term angels signifies real angels as well as the episcopate, cardinals, and bishops, with the emphasis on the bishops who remained in their native countries. The term angels would have been too broad for chapter 12, verse 4. It was appropriate for chapter 12, verses 7 through 9. Although John focused on the episcopate, it is safe to assume that the unfaithful elders and laity will also be cast out during the war. Understand that in chapter 12, verse 4, the third of the cardinals lose what little spiritual condition or state they have, but that Christ does not vomit them out of his mouth, i.e., does not visibly rid his church of them until the war in the heaven, for the false prophet will bring the third of the cardinals into Satan's service, and they all will take their stand face to face with, i.e., in opposition to, the woman, which means they will still be in the church in the sense of visible organization. Note well that the virile son is the central and pivotal figure in the evolvement of the great sign. What Simeon said about the child Jesus in regard to Israel may also be said about the virile son in regard to the church. This child is destined to be the downfall and the rise of many, a sign that will be opposed, so that the thoughts of many hearts may be laid bare. From Luke. Having supreme spiritual authority, the virile son will issue decrees of reform and will command their immediate implementation. Then every member of the church will have to choose either to remain with the mystery of the God or join the mystery of lawlessness. Many will choose the latter, and this event will be the manifest apostasy which St. Paul mentioned to the Thessalonians. Thus, the accounts of Paul and John accord. Paul says the apostasy comes first. John says the unfaithful are cast out of the church formally and manifestly. Paul says the one restraining is gotten out of the middle. John says the virile son is snatched away to the God and his throne. Paul says the son of lawlessness is revealed. John says the beast becomes the Antichrist, Satan's champion of sin. And Paul finally says Christ annihilates the Antichrist. And John says Christ annihilates the beast and his empire during the third woe. Verses 13 and 14 clarify the point that the war in the heaven will be fought and concluded before the woman flees. If the great loud voice in chapter 12, verse 10 is that of the virile son, then he will be devoured or killed only after he has led the faithful through the war to victory over Satan and his followers. Having assassinated the virile son, the dragon will then realize that every faithful cardinal who survived the war is, potentially speaking, another virile son, and for that reason he will try to kill the woman too. Chapter 12 exhibits some looping, but its verses may be now arranged according to the order of events. Verses 1 through 4 plus the first sentence in verse 5, then comes verses 7 through 12. The second sentence in verse 5, the virile son is snatched away, fits most plausibly just after verse 12. And finally, verse 6 is expanded into verses 13 through 18. I say that the second sentence in verse 5 fits most plausibly after 12, i.e. before 13, simply because John placed it immediately before verse 6. In any case, the they in the verb trophoshin, verse 6, refers to the God and the virile son, which connotes that the virile son will be snatched away before the woman reaches safety in the wilderness. After the first sentence in verse 5, the woman symbolizes only the surviving faithful cardinals. The seven thunders in chapter 10 are those same cardinals. Consider now verses 13 through 18. And when the dragon saw that he was cast out unto the earth, he pursued the woman who brought forth the virile one, and to the woman were given the two wings of the eagle, the great one, so that she might fly unto the wilderness, unto her place, where she is nourished therein for a time and times, and a half a time away from the face or mask of the serpent. And the serpent cast out from his mouth after the woman water as a river, so that he might make her swept away by flood. And the earth came to the rescue for the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river which the dragon cast out from its mouth. And the dragon was enraged at the woman and went away to do battle against the rest of her offspring, the ones heeding the commandments of the God and holding the testimony of Jesus. And he took his stand upon the sand of the sea. To understand what John depicted symbolically in the above excerpt, a few terms must be explained first. However, let it be stated beforehand that the exact meaning of verse 16, even after explanation, will still be a matter that only time will tell in full. The term eagle, like head and horn, may be used as a symbol for either a ruler or the nations he rules. For example, Moses wrote, "The Lord will raise up against you a nation from afar, from the end of the earth, that swoops down like an eagle," from Deuteronomy. And God described Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and Hopha, pharaoh of Egypt, respectively, thus: "The great eagle, great of wing, came to Lebanon, but there was another eagle, great of wing, rich in plumage," from Ezekiel. Since a secular ruler derives his power from the nation he rules, the greatness of the ruler connotes the greatness of the nation. John modified eagle with a definite article, even though he had not previously mentioned the term, and this tells the reader that this eagle will be easy to identify. The English equivalent would be the eagle, but John added the nominalized adjective, the great one. Thus, the whole expression signifies the mightiest nation on earth. The reader has already met this emphatic form for designating the superlative, as in the title Babylon the Great in chapter 17, or the tribulation, the great one, chapter 7. The Greek noun has a form called the dual. Duals are used almost exclusively for things that naturally come in pairs or by twos, such as eyes, hands, etc. It therefore at first seemed odd that John did not use just a dual to write the wings of the eagle. His wording is saliently because numerically specific. The two wings of the eagle. The noun pteryx, wing, has several usages. The wing of a bird, a winged creature, a bird, a thing like a wing, such as the flags or skirt of a coat of Greek armor, and anything that covers or protects like a wing. In Greek, as in English, some nouns may be used in synecdoche, a figure of speech in which a part is used for the whole or the whole for the part. The special for the general or the general for the special, as in the 10 hands for 10 sailors. Bearing in mind, however, that the eagle symbolizes a nation, it should be clear to anyone that the two wings are not two parts of the eagle in itself regarded as either territory or populace. Rather, the two wings are of the eagle in the sense that they are its possession, just as someone may have two pets, two cars, etc. And they are from the eagle in the sense that it is their origin. The eagle is the nation whence they came. The reader has already met the genitive case used for indicating both possession and origin in the opening phrase of the prophecy, namely, Apocalypsis Isu Christu, for the revelation is of Christ, in that it is his prophecy that he will fulfill, and the revelation is from him, and that he is literally the origin or creator of it. Understand one very important point here. The woman must flee from where she is to where she will be safe. Therefore, God will not give her two parts of the eagle's territory or populace, but two objects, two things which belong to the eagle and which the woman can use to escape to safety. Like many other terms in the apocalypse, the meaning of the word wilderness is found in the writings of the prophets. Ezekiel wrote, "And I will bring you into the wilderness of people, and there I will plead with you face to face." This means that God led the nation of Israel into the 70-year captivity among the pagan Babylonians in order to cleanse the Jews of their inclination to idolatry and to teach them the consequences of departing from the Ten Commandments. Isaiah wrote, "And the wilderness shall rejoice and shall flourish like the lily." The prophet described the Gentiles as a wilderness because they did not yet have that spiritual life which grows by faith in the true God. St. John the Baptist said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord." In this citation, the Jews, not the Gentiles, are the wilderness for two reasons. One, the religious leaders, even the 70 members of the Sanhedrin, who were appointed by the Romans, had become corrupt and taught many precepts merely human, to the result that the people in general did not worship God in spirit as Jesus said of them, this adulterous and sinful generation. The Jews did not have the fullness of the truth by faith in Jesus Christ, as Jesus himself defines someone who has the fullness of the truth by faith. "I tell you, among those born of woman, no one is greater than John the Baptist, but the least in the kingdom of God is greater than he." It has already been shown that the term kingdom, the kingdom of the God, signifies the same as the kingdom of the heaven, i.e., the church, the visible organization established by Christ, not any other organization begun by a mere human being at a later time. Hence, the term the wilderness in chapter 12, verse 14, designates a region which is not and never has been predominantly Roman Catholic. If said wilderness had recently apostatized, then John would have, at least, intimated harlotry or adultery. Four items of interest may now be determined: the location of the wilderness, the location of the woman when she will begin her flight, the location or identity of the great eagle, and the two objects or things by which the woman will make her escape. First, juxtapose verses 6 and 14. "And the woman fled unto the wilderness, where she has therein a place prepared by the God, so that they may nourish her for days 1,260. And to the woman were given the two wings of the eagle, the great one, so that she might fly unto the wilderness, unto her place, where she is nourished therein for a time and times and half a time, away from the face or mask of the serpent." It has already been shown that there will be only one period of 1,260 days or 42 months, the short time or little while mentioned in chapter 12, verse 12 and chapter 17, verse 10. Therefore, since chapter 12, 14's basic details and their order of mention are the same as chapter 12, verse 6's, it follows that both verses describe one and the same event. The aorist verb fled in verse 6 and the aorist verb were given in verse 14 tell that the event will happen only once. In verse 6, John looped forward to verse 14, perhaps because he wanted to complete the account of the virile son's activities, i.e., that the God and he may nourish her, and thus could John concentrate the narrative to the war in the heaven. The participial phrase prepared by the God in verse 6 and the verb were given in verse 14 indicate acts of divine providence. Hence, divine providence is the common denominator to the woman's place in the wilderness and to the two wings of the great eagle, Thus, verse 14 initiates the idea that the great eagle, the mightiest nation on earth, is a part of that wilderness, the only region on earth where the woman will be safe for the 1260 days. Indeed, John introduced not only the great eagle with a definite article, but also the wilderness, and this intimates that the wilderness can easily be identified too. The woman will spend the 1260 days away from the face of the serpent. Note that John did not write simply away from the serpent. The noun prosopos means face. It also means mask, the kind of mask that a Greek actor held up in front of his face to show what persona he was playing in the drama. John deliberately inserted the term to hint that the dragon, through most of the chapter, symbolizes Satan and his political aspect or mask. Here recall what was said earlier about the term sign in verses 1 and 3. Also bear in mind that as the dragon was in the presence of the woman, verse 4, like Latin preposition coram, so the woman was face to face with the dragon. Yet the phrase, the face of the serpent, serves to remind the reader less about the visibility of the serpent's mask than about its description. The description is the more important because it involves not merely who the mask is, but also where it is. The face of the serpent is the face of the dragon, and the salient features in the description of the dragon are the 7 heads and 10 horns. See verse 3. The phrase, the face of the serpent, alludes forward to the description of the beast while he was having 7 heads and 10 horns in chapter 17, not the beast while it was having 10 horns and 7 heads in chapter 13. And whereas the events of chapter 12 will happen in the politico-economic context of chapter 17, Babylon the Great will also be part of Satan's mask at the time the woman clothed with the sun begins her escape. Thus, the chief components of Satan's face or mask are Babylon and the beast, and Satan is the mastermind behind them. The beast rules the many waters, 7 mountains, which are the nations of Asia and Africa. Babylon rules the earth, which is Europe. The beast is waging bloody persecution in his domain. Babylon is not yet doing so. Hence the cardinals, the woman in verse 1, did not convene for the papal election in the beast's domain, but in Babylon's, probably in Vatican City in Rome, the traditional place. Thus, the surviving faithful cardinals, the woman after the first sentence in verse 5, must flee from a place in Europe to another place where she will be safe, away from the face of the serpent. For obvious reasons, she will not flee to Asia or Africa or Antarctica. She will not flee to any place in that territory that extends from Mexico down to the southern tip of South America for 2 reasons. Said territory is predominantly Roman Catholic and therefore cannot be called wilderness. At least 2/3 of the world's Roman Catholics reside in said territory, and the beast cannot become a beast in the full sense of the term unless he persecutes the Catholics therein. Thus, the woman will flee either to Australia or to that region of North America comprising Canada and the United States. Neither in present nor in prospect can Australia accommodate the description, the mightiest nation on earth. Like South America, it will politically succumb to the beast's economic coercion. Since the 2 wings given to the woman came from the great eagle, to the great eagle they will go. The eagle, the great one, is the United States of North America, which is not and never has been predominantly Roman Catholic. The cardinals must travel fast and far, and the best possibility for succeeding in their escape is to go by air, not by land or sea. The meaning of the term, the 2 wings, is the synecdochial combination of usages number 2 and number 3 of pteryx, to wit, the 2 winged objects or the 2 things with wings. In other words, the woman will literally fly unto the wilderness by means of 2 aircraft. Since the 2 wings are possessions of the great eagle itself, they will probably be military transports. Please note well this point. A beast in the full sense of the prophetical term is a king who uses his kingdom to afflict all or almost all of the members of God's visible organization. Therefore, the beast can fulfill that definition only if he afflicts the Roman Catholics in the nations of Europe and in the Hispanic nations of the Western Hemisphere. for they are 5/6 of the total. As long as said Hispanic nations remain predominantly Roman Catholic, and as long as Australia does not become the mightiest nation on earth, my statements about the wilderness and the great eagle in chapter 12, verse 14 will stand. The prophetic term earth, in its broadest sense, signifies temporal affairs or secular things. In chapter 12, verse 16, the term conveys the idea of government agency. For note what John wrote. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river. To open the mouth is a biblical expression indicating that someone speaks with authority. For example, when Jesus was about to deliver the Sermon on the Mount, he opened his mouth and, after Christ finished the sermon, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as their scribes. John used the same expression in regard to the beast after God had allowed Satan to give the beast great authority, and he opened his mouth. The term stoma means mouth, like the English word. It can also signify the outlet entrance to a river or bay, but the Greek noun has a usage that the English one does not. The point of a weapon, the edge of a sword. The mouth devours, the edge of a sword kills. In view of the verb swallowed in chapter 12, verse 16 above, the term mouth suggests a synecdoche for sword, the symbol for the military, and therefore the use of physical force in defense of the woman. That John punned with the phrase opened its mouth is corroborated by the context. The Old Testament prophets sometimes described a military force as a river or flood. Isaiah wrote, "Therefore the Lord raises against them, the Jews, the waters of the river, the great and mighty, the king of Assyria and all his power." And again, Isaiah said, "Behold, the Lord has a strong one and a mighty, Assyria, who like a downpour of hail, like the flood of water, great and overflowing." And Jeremiah wrote, "Egypt surges like the Nile, like rivers of billowing waters. I will surge forward," he says, "and cover the earth, destroying the city and its people." And Jeremiah used the same idea in describing Nebuchadnezzar's campaign against the Philistines. "Thus saith the Lord, Behold, there come up waters out of the north, and they shall be as an overflowing torrent, and they shall cover the land and all that is therein, and the city and the inhabitants thereof. Then the man shall cry, and all the inhabitants of the land shall howl." Thus, the meaning of chapter 12, verses 15 and 16 seems this: the serpent will send a military force after the woman to kill her, but the government of the great eagle will authorize its own military to destroy the force pursuing her. Some people have asserted that the serpent's river in chapter 12, verse 15 symbolizes slanderous propaganda, and I have not even a velleity of doubt that they will be proven right. But John used a Greek perfect participle that means swept away by flood, which tells me that the serpent intended to make the woman dead. So the passage does not exclude the idea of false propaganda against the woman. It does include several terms that the Old Testament prophets used in describing military force and destruction. Considering the context of the passage, the very sequence of events leading up to it, I conclude that John meant to communicate the latter. I reiterate, however, that only time will tell the meaning in full. Here are 4 translations of chapter 12, verse 18, 3 of them being in current use. "Then the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore, and the dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and he took up his position by the shore of the sea, and he stood upon the sand of the sea." The first one is from the New NRSV. The second one's from New International Version. The third one's New American Bible. Fourth one is Westminster Version. John actually wrote, "And he took his stand upon the sand of the sea." The Meek Seer made verse 18 oxymoronic. The adjective oxymoronic comes from the Greek oxus, sharp, keen, pointed, and moros, foolish, and thus means pointedly foolish. However, one cannot see John's point of foolishness unless one knows grade school Greek here, specifically the differentiation between sand and sand. The noun amos signifies sand in the sense of sandy ground or soil, whereas the noun samos strictly denotes sea sand, and in the plural would signify the links or dunes by the sea. In other words, the term amos per se has absolutely nothing to do with a real sea or seashore. Rather, it indicates the main characteristic of the terrain where the dragon took his stand. It has already been shown that John described the ancient Roman Empire as having two halves, the earth and the sea. The earth is Europe and the sea is North Africa and the Middle East. The main characteristic of the terrain of North Africa and the Middle East is, lo and behold, sandy ground or soil. John made verse 18 oxymoronic so that people who know how to read will hopefully know how to read and thereby get the point about the sea. The sea is the one from which the beast will initially ascend, and it is the one unto which the second plague of the third woe will be poured out. The loud voice in chapter 12, verse 10 cried, "Woe to the earth and the sea." Yet does anyone seriously hold the notion that the third woe's second plague will be inflicted on little wiggly fish? If one takes up translating the apocalypse or commenting on it, surely with the intention of getting down to its nitty-gritty, one ought at least to know the difference between sand and sand. When the woman reaches her place in the wilderness, the period of 1260 days or 42 months will commence. At that time, several events will happen. 1, the two witnesses will appear. 2, the beast will occupy Jerusalem and the rest of Israel. 3, the beast will appoint the false prophet as his regent over Europe. 4, St. Michael the Archangel will take his stand upon the sea and the earth from chapter 10, verses 2 and 5. 5, the dragon, Satan himself in person, will take his stand upon the sand of the sea. The abomination of desolation will take its stand in a holy place, to be explained in comments in chapter 13. The seven thunders will speak, chapter 10, verse 3. Although one cannot know beforehand exactly what the seven thunders will say, one can reasonably expect that they will do at least one or two of the following. They will counsel recent apostates to repent and return to the church and will urge separated brethren to rejoin it. 2, they will issue severest warnings to those who are persecuting or intend to persecute God's holy ones. 3, they will exhort the saints to persevere in the patient endurance of Christ unto death, and even to pray for their persecutors. 4, they will remind the faithful that God is the supreme power and authority, and so they will instruct them that the beast will go to annihilation after 3.5 years, and therefore is not to be greatly feared. 5, they will declare the principal teachings of Christ. And 6, they will ask God, the Blessed Virgin Mary, and St. Michael to aid the faithful in spiritual battle and physical suffering. We covered a lot of ground in chapter 12 and introduced a lot of symbols and their meanings. Chapters 17, 12, and 13 are pivotal in the apocalypse and human history. Next, we'll dive into chapter 13, where more of the history of the beast is explained. The book is found at apocalypseletterbyletter.com, and a discount code is provided at the top of the page. May the Lord Jesus Christ bless you and keep you.